Hey everybody, in this video we are going to talk about one of the most popular suburbs on the north side of Indianapolis, although slightly overshadowed by some of the other ones. It's Noblesville, Indiana, and the pros and cons of living there, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Compton with the Compton Home Group. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time to the channel and you want to know everything there is to know about living in Indianapolis or living in Noblesville, Indiana, or any place in the Indianapolis metro, then be sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the little bell so you're notified every time we do a new video, each and every week. Now, we get reach outs from people all over the country with questions about places like Noblesville, the suburbs on the north side, the suburbs on the west side, suburbs anywhere surrounding Indianapolis, and Indianapolis itself. So if you have questions at all about any place around the Indianapolis metro, then don't hesitate to reach out any way that you know how. We'll always have your back with those questions, and we'll certainly have your back whenever it comes time for you to make your move to the Indy metro. All right, so we're going to get into the pros and the cons of living in Noblesville, Indiana. And some of these pros and cons, of course, you might be able to do a little bit of research on and find, but really, we're trying to dig down into those things that you don't really notice so much until you spend some time there and really get to know Noblesville and just get a really good feel as to what it's all about. So there are all kinds of little nuances, pros, cons of every single town and city across the entire country. So this is what we're going to get into with Noblesville. And of course, the pros and cons, they can always be a little bit subjective for sure. But this is a little bit of a list of things that I've certainly experienced because I've never lived in Noblesville itself, but I have spent a lot of time in Noblesville. So little things that I've noticed, but also in talking with people that live in Noblesville, the things that they've noticed after living there for a certain period of time. All right, so pro number one, and this would be something that should be fairly easy to find, honestly, is that the schools there are very highly rated, and the quality of life in general is really quite high in Noblesville. But Noblesville schools, even though they're highly rated, they're a little bit overshadowed by some of the other schools nearby. But anywhere you are on the north side, the west side, some of these fantastic suburbs that surround Indy, you're for the most part always going to have highly rated schools. And so that's what a lot of people have questions about when they're moving, let's say, to the north side. That's their best location. And they say, well, we know CARMEL is so incredible, the school system there, Fishers and WESTFIELD, and they have very highly rated schools. How is Noblesville? And I have to say that I've never had personal experience going through Noblesville or any of my kids through Noblesville, but I do know a lot of people who have had kids that go through Noblesville, and I know people that have kids in the Noblesville schools now. And online ratings are fantastic for Noblesville, and for the most part, everybody that I talk to, they have really good experiences there. It's not the biggest high school, not the biggest school corporation. Noblesville is a little over 60,000 people, and it is growing, so it will get bigger. And if you compare it to something like CARMEL, which has over 5,000 kids at the high school, it's certainly much smaller than that, a little over 3,000 kids or so. So it's still good size. It's still large to where you have plenty of choice, you have plenty of opportunity at Noblesville, and there's plenty of resources flowing into the school. So it is still a highly rated school and very popular. And I have to say that the people who are associated with Noblesville schools, kids that go to Noblesville, they are very, very proud of being at Noblesville or a Noblesville alum, and there's nothing wrong with that. So the fact that they're so proud of being a Noblesville Miller, that should say a lot. They don't have a lot of bad things to say about it, that's for sure. So the schools would definitely be a pro. And say you don't have kids and you live in Noblesville, you should still care about the schools because the quality of schools, the reputation for the schools, it still does a lot for the value of your home. So if it's a great school corporation, it's going to hold the home value that you have, hold a lot more steady or rise steadily over time. Pro number two is that, actually, this one boggles my mind some, as to how Noblesville gets overshadowed so much by other places around Indianapolis. Noblesville is really not missing anything. It has a lot of variety. It is an exceptionally cool place. It has Morse Reservoir, which is not as large as Geist Reservoir on the east side, but it's still really large, and you actually have public access to it, so you could drop a boat into it if you want to, and you can fish, you can ski, you can jet ski. They even have a little beach although, of course it's not terribly fancy, but it's a place that you can take the family and actually be on kind of a beach right there on the reservoir. It's beautiful. There are homes around the reservoir in a lot of places. It's just a unique spot, and Noblesville has that. Plus, Noblesville also has Hamilton Town Center, which is a giant outdoor mall, so there's plenty of shopping. US 37 goes really right up into Noblesville, and there's plenty of the commercial stores, all of the stuff that you would ever need going up through there. It has a tremendous amount, plus a smaller concert venue, pretty close to the downtown area of Noblesville, the First Merchants Pavilion. Really neat place to go and check out free concerts all during the summer. Just easy, very, very fun to do with the family. Plus, they have one of the biggest concert venues in the entire area. You've got Lucas Oil Stadium and Baker's Life Fieldhouse and the amphitheater, the Lawn, used to be called the Lawn, right next to Victory Field downtown. But up at Noblesville, you have Ruoff Music Center, which can hold roughly 30,000 people, and huge acts coming to the Indianapolis area. That's where most of them go, especially during the spring, summer, and fall, the good weather months, to play the shows. And that's in Noblesville. So Noblesville isn't really lacking anything. You can find $1 million homes in Noblesville, without a doubt. You can find ultra luxury homes in Noblesville. You could even get a little bit of space in Noblesville. It can be a little bit more rural in parts, and then you can find more affordable homes in Noblesville too. So it just kind of runs the gamut of everything. Outdoor things to do, have the White River that runs right through Noblesville, and people do utilize that some. Plus, you've got more golf courses in Noblesville than you do over in CARMEL, or at least it's pretty darn close. There's about 7 or so, I believe, just thinking off the top of my head, golf courses just in Noblesville, and people will travel to some of these golf courses in Noblesville. Places like Sagamore, which is Nicholas' design course, an incredible place. And then you have Purgatory, which is also an incredible place to play. But you have more affordable places to play too, like Stony Creek, which is a great little golf course in incredible shape, very, very affordable to play. But Noblesville just has a tremendous amount. And then, of course, it's not far from CARMEL, Fishers, or Westfield if you want to jump over into those places and take advantage of anything that they have to offer as well. So Noblesville just isn't missing anything, and it's amazing to me that it gets overshadowed so much by so many other places around Indy. So pro number 3 kind of pulls out of that pro number 2, in that you can find anything home-wise in Fishers. If you want ultra luxury, you want $1 million home, you want something on the water in Morris, well, you can get that. There is that opportunity. But at the lower end of that, if you don't want to spend $1 million and you have maybe $300,000 to spend, Noblesville is more affordable than what CARMEL and Fishers are generally. So you can get just a little bit more for your money in Noblesville than you can there, a little bit more house, and sometimes you might have a little bit more choice in Noblesville too at that particular price range. You're not going to get anything in Noblesville easily, let's say $200,000 or $250,000. For the most part, in Noblesville, just like in Fishers or Westfield, really for the most part, you got to be at that 300 mark, pretty close to it. Some opportunities underneath it, but when you get to 300 and 350, very difficult to get into a place like CARMEL, a little easier in Fishers, and definitely easier in Noblesville. So overall, just a little bit more affordable than what you're going to find really across the north side. All right, so let's get into the cons of Noblesville. And this first one, it could be a little bit nitpicky and actually pretty subjective too, but it's still going to affect you in some way at some time during the year that you're living there. So the location of Noblesville can hurt it some. So if a person is looking to live on the north side or in the northern suburbs of Indianapolis, like CARMEL, Fishers, Westfield, Noblesville is a little further out there to the northeast than the others. So if you work in Indianapolis, or especially downtown Indianapolis, that's a longer commute. I mean, that's going to be one of the longest commutes that you'll have of any of the suburbs that surround Indianapolis. So it's something that you're going to face every single day of the week that you go into work. But if you don't work in Indianapolis, or if you work in CARMEL or Fishers, or even in Noblesville, or you work from home, and you say, I don't care, I don't have to worry about any kind of commute, you'll still run into it from time to time, because you will want to go into Indianapolis to, let's say, see a Colts game, a Fever game, a Pacers game, an Indians game, or go to the zoo, or go to a museum, or just go to a restaurant in Indianapolis someplace. And you'll be a little bit further away from it. So you won't be right on top of it, and you'll have to calculate those drive times. And going into Indianapolis and back up to Noblesville, a lot of times you'll utilize US 37. And right now, as this video is being made, there's a lot of renovations being done to it. So eventually it's going to be incredible. It's going to be like Keystone Parkway that goes up through CARMEL and really don't have any stoplights, and traffic flows so much better than it used to. That's what US 37 is eventually going to look like. But gosh, just 5 and 10 years ago, there were a lot of stoplights, and that was really about the only way that you can get into Noblesville kind of directly from Fishers or Indianapolis. You can use I-69 to get in there a little bit for sure, but 37 is used very heavily to get into Noblesville, and it was just really, really thick during the peak hours, of course, in the morning and in the afternoon after work. So you'll still have to deal with that from time to time. But, if you're only doing that, let's say 4, 5, 6 times a year, maybe a little bit more or even less than that, or you go to the airport, which this is going to be about the longest commute to the Indianapolis International Airport that you're going to find around any place in the Indy Metro, then a couple times a year, no big deal. Not going to be a big thing that would deter you from living in Noblesville. Plus, Noblesville can feel, at least in parts, a little more rural than certainly CARMEL and Fishers. CARMEL and Fishers are a little bit more crowded. They're bigger. CARMEL's a little over 100,000 people. Fishers is getting close to 100,000 people or so, and you can have just tiny segments of those that might feel rural, but Noblesville can have a little bit more rural feel. That's not necessarily a con, because that could be a pro for somebody, a con for somebody else, but because of its location, it can give you that some. So it's just one thing to consider. If you've got an address in Noblesville that you really like, make sure you pop that into your phone and calculate the drive time and the direction or the options for the route that you're going to take to get from that house to where you need to be, especially on a daily basis, because it will matter and it'll affect you. So con number 2, and this piggybacks a little bit on con number 1 being location, but con number 2 really is the fact that the White River does go essentially right through the heart of Noblesville. And so the location of Noblesville being right there on the river makes it difficult to cross the river. Now, Noblesville's infrastructure is certainly good. It's getting better, and I'm sure 10 years from now it's going to be much better than it is even now. But to get from the east side of Noblesville to the west, or if you want to go from Noblesville to Westfield, or if you want to go from Noblesville to CARMEL, or even different parts of Fishers, you have to contend with the White River sometimes. So there's only a few ways to cross it, and you can do that up at 206th Street, which is way north Noblesville. You can certainly do it on State Road 32, which cuts right through the heart of Noblesville and goes right through the downtown area of Noblesville, and it's actually really cool. Love the downtown Noblesville, Old Town Square, the courthouse in the center. It's really, really cool. But 32 goes right through that little part, and that's the way you can get across there at the White River. And then on the south end at 146th Street, which is really the southern border of Noblesville, if you go south of that, you get into Fishers. That's another place, and that's a super busy, fast road as well. It's the only place you can get across the White River. So you'll always have to contend with it, and I would say that makes things a little bit more inconvenient. If you're going from east to west within CARMEL, pretty easy to do. If you're going east to west in Fishers, also pretty easy to do, and you've got a lot of options. And the same with Westfield. So Noblesville, you just have to make sure you're thinking about that. Just have those few options to actually get across that river from one side to the other. So con number 3, and this is definitely not a knock against Noblesville at all, and again, it could be a little bit subjective too, although I would say Noblesville doesn't have as swanky or contemporary or new feel as what CARMEL, Fishers have, or even Westfield for that matter, in the direction that they're going. And that's part of the personality of Noblesville. Like I said, that downtown area, I love it, and it's unique. It's not like Westfield, it's not like CARMEL or Fishers at all. Got this old square, and they held on to the historic nature of it. Courthouse in the center and neat shops and restaurants surrounding that. That's fantastic, and there's no plan to really tear all of that down and start over at all. But outside of that, if you get off of the square there in Noblesville, you can actually find some older parts of Noblesville and honestly some rougher parts. Now, if you go through Fishers and CARMEL and maybe a little bit of Westfield, but Westfield is smaller than Noblesville for sure, and just a little bit different, definitely. But you can find in Noblesville a rougher spot more easily than you can in any of those other places. It's really difficult to find one in CARMEL and Fishers. Now, I'm certainly not saying that when I say rough, I mean dangerous. I think Noblesville's safety record is really quite high. It's right up there with everybody else on the north side. I never feel threatened or anything regarding safety in a bad way in Noblesville whatsoever. It's just that you've got a few places that are a little bit more run down and they're a little bit easier to find. But for the most part, most of Noblesville is really quite nice. And I am a big fan of Noblesville for pros that I talked about at the beginning, especially number 2, is that Noblesville just really isn't missing anything. And it's just incredible that it gets overshadowed so much. But there are just a few rougher spots. And we know where those are, and you're going to figure out where those are too if you're going through Noblesville. And I've definitely heard people that live out of town and they come in and visit Noblesville that, yeah, you know what, Noblesville's got a couple of just rough edges here and there, and it's true, but it's completely pushed out by a lot of the nicer portions of it, and definitely nothing to do with safety. All right, so there you have it, 3 pros, 3 cons for living in Noblesville, Indiana. If you have any questions at all about Noblesville or Indianapolis or any of the suburbs surrounding the Indy Metro, then don't hesitate to reach out any way that you know how. And until the next one, we'll see you later.